Hi everybody, this is Dr. Paul Terrier here, and I'm here to talk to you all about homeopathy and homeopathic medicine. This is one of the most common, the things I most commonly prescribe to my patients, but not a lot is known about it, so I've decided to make a little video explaining a bit about what homeopathy does, what it is, and how I use it in my practice. So, to start with, the most basic question is, what is homeopathy? And it's a very basic question, but at the same time it's a very difficult question to answer. To put it, as simply as possible, it's a different way of looking at therapies and medicines. It's classifying therapies and, medicines specifically we're going to use, but you can use it for all types of therapy. But, in this context of this discussion, we're going to be using it with specific medicines, specific agents that we're going to use to, affect a response in the body. By classifying these remedies based on the type of patients they cure, rather than the type of diseases they treat. This is a very critical distinction. Instead of needing to diagnose a disease beforehand, what we'll do is we'll simply look at your symptoms and look at the remedies that cure symptoms like that and treat accordingly. We don't need to go and settle on diagnoses and so forth to the same degree that we would have to in an allopathic practice, for instance. This is not to say that diagnoses aren't important once in a while. Like if you come in, you're having the symptoms of a heart attack, I'm making a diagnosis, heart attack, and I'm sending you to emerge. This is usually for more chronic conditions and so forth, and conditions that could not lead to death imminently, but it's still a very important way of looking at or a thing to learn about with homeopathy. So how do we find out what remedies cure what? There's two sources of information. The first being provings, which we're going to discuss below, and the second being clinical data. Clinical data is basically word of mouth from practitioners who figured out a remedy does something and they spread it along either through publications or through word of mouth. It's an important source of data, but the very important one, and homeopathy's great innovation in medicine, is the proving, which we're going to discuss now. A proving is administering a remedy, whether it's crude or what's called potentized, and we'll talk about what potentized means, to a reasonably healthy person to see the effects it has on them. We're measuring the effect the remedy has on the functioning of the whole body. We're seeing how this remedy interacts with the body's, ways of being, with its many systems as a whole, as a unit. This gives us a set of symptoms that the body is produced with, that the remedy produces in the body, and these are the basis of how we use homeopathy. The key to homeopathy is to take a very thorough examination of a patient's symptoms and match them to a remedy that fits as closely as possible. We will administer the remedy to the person who has the symptoms that the remedy can provoke in a healthy person. This doesn't make a lot of sense. In kind of logical thinking, when we hear about this, we think, oh, well, wouldn't that make the person worse? And, it doesn't, actually. When we've done this again and again and again, things tend to go quite a bit better. So this is explained a little bit better by this diagram. In this diagram, we've got these blue ovals that represent the body, that represent the organism as a whole. And we've got these little red stars. These red stars represent a disease. They represent a distorted way of functioning that the body is trapped in. The first diagram, it's underneath the heading natural state, is the body with a disease. It's stuck in this way of functioning, and it really can't do much about it itself. The second diagram is us administering a homeopathic. If we get the perfect prescription that we're going to give the exact same disease to the body as it has naturally. At this point, something very interesting happens. The body has what we call homeostasis. It has an inherent ability to adapt, to fight off invaders, to kind of push itself in order to maintain its own physiological balance. When you administer a remedy to the body, that's, in the same state as it is naturally, the body will fight off the remedy, will compensate for it, but it will also start to address the deeper disease states that it's stuck in. It's a very interesting phenomenon, and when it starts to address these disease states, they tend not to come back. The body tends to get rid of them and tends to eventually become free of them altogether, as is shown in this diagram, the second diagram here. The end result that we're looking for is going from a state with a disease to health, a state where no disease is present because the body has, in a sense, been tricked into fighting it off. Homeostasis is the way that we do this. The body will always compensate for things that are occurring to it in the external environment. This is just a basic rule of life, whether on a cellular level or on the level of a more complex organism like a human. The body will react against the stimulus, and when we give a body the same stimulus that it seems to be stuck in, that causes the same pattern that the body seems to be stuck in, we've noticed that the body begins to correct itself, and more towards the long term. This is in almost diametric opposition to the way conventional medicine treats diseases. Conventional medicine and conventional medications in particular tend to oppose a disease process. If the body wants to go left, they'll push it right. If the blood pressure is too high, they'll lower it. This promotes a very different response in terms of the body's, in terms of how the body's going to respond to these medications. This is shown by this diagram. If the response of a body in its natural state is that arrow, let's say that arrow represents increased blood pressure, the remedy administered opposes that force. It's not the same as it opposes it. It will try to keep the body, it will try to control the body's responsiveness and keep it within a certain level that we've decided, through statistical analysis is representative of health. However, the body doesn't take this sitting down. The body will usually compensate. It will start pushing itself back up. And if we're using the blood pressure example, the body will start, again, raising blood pressure. Usually when this happens, the dosage of meds are increased. Later on, the body just loses all responsiveness to those medications and just completely jacks up, blood pressure. And at that point, usually in conventional medication, you have to change to a medication that has a different mechanism of action, or more serious consequences will happen. So that explains everything about the difference between the two ways of classifying therapies and the two ways of doing medicine. The next topic to discuss in terms of homeopathy is that of the infinitesimal remedy. This type of remedy is actually very interesting because the originator of homeopathy, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, used at first doses that his contemporaries would be familiar with, material doses. If the remedy was, cinchona bark, he would give you a tincture of cinchona bark. But he discovered that when a remedy is truly similar to a person's symptoms, they need a lot less of it. So he started reducing the dose, and reducing it, and reducing it, and reducing it, and reducing it. Eventually, he started to find that he was using almost no actual physical material, but still the remedies had an effect. Eventually, he gets to the point about 12, what we call 12 C dilutions, 12 100-to-1 dilutions. There's no physical particles of the remedy left, but still the remedies worked. This has been one of the biggest sticking points against homeopathy in the 200 years since it's been originated. Oh yeah, it's been about 200 years now. So this has been studied experimentally quite extensively, and the effect has been found to hold some weight. People and organisms and animals and children and so forth do respond to these remedies. The question of how or why or what's going on, however, all of those questions do remain mysterious. So I'm afraid I don't personally have an answer to those questions as to how they work. I know they work, but I don't know how. The remedies are made in a very specific process. What we take is that crude substance, that little star diamond. We start by making it doing what's called a trituration. A trituration is taking up one part of that crude substance and grinding it up with 100 parts of lactose for a while, usually about an hour. When we're done with that, we take one part of the resulting mixture, which is called the C1 mixture, take one part of the C1 mixture and mix it in with 100 parts of lactose. Do that again for another hour. Take one part of the resulting mixture of that, which is called the C2 trituration, and take it and grind it up with another 100 parts of lactose. This is called the C3 trituration. After we're done with the triturating part, we will begin to make do the liquid dilutions. We will add one part of the C3 trituration, which is a lactose powder. It dissolves very easily in water. We'll add 99 parts water to it, shake it up, and the shaking part seems to be clinically very important. We can't just throw our remedies into a swimming pool. We need to serially dilute and succuss them. We need to do this over and over and over again and shake them or triturate them and grind them, one of the two. And this seems to be what gives remedies their activity. How this works, I'm not sure, but clinically we've confirmed it again and again and again. So, getting back to our story, we shake it up, and this is known as the 4C dilution. Take one drop of that, add 100 drops of water, or drops, parts. Shake it up, 5C. Eventually we continue doing this until we reach the potency that we are wanting to use. We'll either use the commonly used potencies are 6C, 30C, 200C, 1M, which is 1000C, 10M, which is 10,000C, 50M, which is 50,000C, and CM, which is 100,000C. So basically at 12C we've run out of particles, and after that it's just all it's all whatever the mechanism of homeopathy is. So when eventually we get to the concentration of the remedy that we want to use, we will take that liquid and dump it on a pile of lactose pills. And these lactose pills usually are what we identify in homeopathy as the remedy. As I said before, clinically and experimentally, we've done a lot of work with infinitesimal remedies. They work very well. The clinical responses, I think anyone who's practiced homeopathy for more than a couple of years, the clinical responses are undeniable. But and the experimental results are also undeniable, not just on humans, but also on animals and on experimental organisms like bacteria and duckweed. Duckweed, for some instance, is a very popular homeopathic research organism. So I've written a blog post on this. It's called Research Issues in Homeopathy, and it goes into, in some detail, research in homeopathy and methodological issues concerning research. So if you'd like more information on this, please just consult that blog post, and you should get a lot more. So, having established all that, the big process using homeopathic medicine is not so much the remedy, it's how do you pick the remedy. At this point, there are, depending on how you count, between 1,500 and 10,000 remedies. So selecting one is the major effort. After we've selected it, therapy goes quite quickly and easily. And selecting it can be quite a complicated process. It's quite complicated because you can do it in several ways. You can do it based on the pathology, based on the person's symptoms, on their psychological processes, or on their unconscious processes. What I tend to do with patients is I have a conversation with them. We will talk and generally determine what's bothering you, what's wrong, what is up in your life. Quite often people will try to disguise this or cover it up with positive thinking and trying to reframe it and doing a lot of sort of positive thinking, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to kind of distract them from this. But a lot of the time, when something is bothering you in your life, it's a sign. It's basically something that's emanating inward from a disease, from a state. And I'm going to be making another video about the state, about disease, and about how it relates to our everyday lives, and kind of a way to understand our movement through states. So I'll explain a bit more about this then. but when something is truly disturbing us, it's a sign of that state, of that deeper disease that we're stuck in. What I do with people is that we will just explore this. We'll explore their feelings around it, their story around it, and eventually we'll kind of disengage the conscious mind and go and explore this state. When we do disclose this state, when we do explore this state, we will find the substance that you need. We will find the remedy. Sometimes people even give me the name of their remedies. It's quite remarkable, actually, that someone would be describing their place that they're in, this place that they're stuck, and that they can't get out of, and they'll be using the exact same words and approving. And then, quite frequently, they'll give me the name of that substance. That happens about 50% of my patients. They'll give me the name of the substance, and then I'll look it up, and, oh wow, when we proved that substance, when we did approving of it, all those themes came up, all those words came up. It's amazing. It's just a beautiful process. Once we've gotten the remedy, we have to take it. So once we decide on this, I will give you some pills, just little lactose sugar pills. If I will either ask you to dunk them in a glass of water and drink the entire glass, or I'll have you put them in a dropper bottle and take a certain amount of drops per day. I might also, if you're far away, just ask you to use a jar and take a certain amount per day. For instance, a teaspoon or a tablespoon or what have you. If we're doing this kind of repeated dosing in a dropper bottle or a jar, it's very important that you shake the dropper bottle or jar before you take it. This kind of gives the remedy a little bit of a boost, gives it a little bit more charge, and it really helps your body kind of assimilate the remedy. It's a little bit different each time. We've determined this clinically over a long period of time. So here's a photo of a dropper bottle, if you don't know what I mean. It's basically a glass bottle with one of those little droppy glass things and a rubber top, so you can control the amount of water that you're taking into your body. Reactions. This is the big issue in homeopathy, and it can drive some people off if the reactions are too extreme. The reaction is basically your body reacting against the disease it's having, or the disease it naturally has. These can be pretty extreme, and so I will often underdose people on the first prescription. I will often give them less strong of a stimulus than they can deal with, or than they can deal with. I will give them a weaker stimulus than they can possibly manage, because I don't want to stress their system. I don't want to cause symptoms that would be disturbing for them. So quite often in my first prescriptions, nothing happens the first time. The person might feel a little bit better, they might have a few weird dreams, or nothing might happen whatsoever. If this happens, this is fine. What we'll do is we'll probably get you on a stronger dose at that point. However, if we do have a reaction, the most common ones are either our removing of symptoms, shifting, and people will start to shift where they're mentally stuck at. I'll ask them about the problems they described in the interview, and they'll say, those problems aren't such a big issue anymore. And their symptoms start to go away. One of the most common, but physical reactions can occur as well, and one of the most common ones is their symptoms getting temporarily worse. This tends not to happen a lot with me because I am so cautious about underdosing people, but it has happened on occasionally. If this happens, this is your body reacting against your internal disease. It will get better. It will improve. So we don't need to worry about that. A second of which is rashes. This is a very common symptom. Again, it's a sign of your body externalizing disease, reacting against something, and rashes are just a common way your body has of dealing with it. A third very common one is discharge. Runny nose, diarrhea, sweating, vaginal discharge. This is just your body getting rid of toxins. It also can take the form of blisters less frequently. And the last is dreams and emotional processing. Quite frequently people find themselves going over memories in their head and having things click that they hadn't really understood or thought about before. Quite often they'll be dreaming, and in that dreaming resolving a lot of their emotional issues. This is one of the best signs that a remedy is really doing something good. So if you are getting a reaction, particularly a troubling one, please don't panic. If you're getting a rash that's really itchy or a discharge or something, email me. If you can wait 3 or 4 hours for me to respond to you, please do email me. This is fine. I really prefer my patients do email me and discuss what's happening before they do something about it. If it's unbearable, I'll usually give you my cell phone number. And if it is an emergency call, please call your local emergency department if you're a distance patient, or in Calgary, you can call HealthLink at 403-943-5465. This is it's a 24-hour service with nurse practitioners, and they'll just talk you through whatever you're going through. And if you need to call Emerge, they'll call Emerge for you, and they'll tell you what to do. It's a really good service. As I said before, reactions are your body reacting to the remedy and clearing out its disease. They're healthy, but when you suppress them, for instance, if you use cortisol for an external rash, or you start using antihistamines or anything else to deal with discharges, it's going to impede the entire healing process, and this is very, very damaging to your vitality's efforts to heal. It's not irreparable most of the time, but it's very damaging. So this is why it's so important for you to just talk to me. Just keep me informed of what's going on with you, and we will deal with it in a way that will not interfere with your body's responses. So, what are our long-term goals with homeopathic treatment? Eventually, after the reactions are dealt with, and reactions generally very early on. If you've been with me for a while, if my patients who have been with me and who've been on a couple of remedies, they tend not to react at all in that way. They tend to, just feel better, which is wonderful. That's where I hope to get everyone at eventually. But after the reactions are dealt with, you become free of that state you came in. Many people just feel this incredible sense of happiness. It's like this thing that they were not even really fully conscious of that was bothering them so much is gone. It's beautiful to see. Over time, however, a new state can crystallize. They can get stuck somewhere else. Usually about 6 months to a year, although I have had patients for about 2 or 3 years who are on the same remedy, so that's a much more individual thing. If you've watched my video on naturopathic medicine, you remember this diagram. This is a diagram of our health, of our progress over time. The vertical axis to the left is health, and the horizontal axis, the flat line, is time. And over time, if we consider giving the first remedy at the start, a person is cured of their disease, and then their body, having a lot more vital energy, begins to tackle a deeper one. It begins to tackle either state or disease or a problem that they've had that they've been unable to tackle before due to a lack of vitality. At that point, this is what I need you to do and come in. If you start getting a new problem after you've been on your remedy for a while, it may be your state has shifted and we simply need to get you on a new remedy. If that's the case, we'll take your case again, get you on that new remedy, and get you keep going up that roller coaster and keep going up until we reach a place of stability long term. The remedies we go to, the diseases afterwards, that we acquire after our initial remedies, they're not random. There's a very clear pattern in where we go after our initial remedies and where we go subsequent to that. I'm going to make another video on this topic because this body of work about where people go, their remedies after their initial remedies, is very fascinating and paints this beautiful picture of human development. I hope to be able to share it with you very soon. This is my contact information. If any of you from this description would like or have seen a lot or seen enough to decide that you would like to experience this, please do email me or come to my website or give me a call if you're in Calgary. I'd love to hear from all of you, and please do email me or comment if you have any questions. Thank you very much for listening to my video or listening and watching my video. Take care of yourselves, alright? Bye.